Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, Cheating Girlfriend. Had been dating this girl for almost 7 years. We lived together 6 years of that time. My line of work was electronic consulting, setting up systems with tons of sensors. Good money, but a lot of travel hours. Just setting the stage here. Anyhow, at one point got the feeling that something was off. Nothing I could put my finger on, but a gut feeling. I'm pretty good follow my feelings, so I decided to put some proof in the pudding. While she was out, I had placed a sound-activated recorder in each room of the condo. Very small device as the storage was on my office PC. This was done on a Friday afternoon. Spent the weekend with her and had a good time. Sunday night, before bed, I took my luggage and tools out to my car and also popped a GPS tracker on her car. Left the next morning and headed to my next site. Plan was I was to be away for 2 weeks. I talked with her daily for the first week. The second week was really hit and miss. Times that she was normally home I would call, and it would go to voicemail. I would ask her about it when I spoke to her again, and I got quite a few excuses. Work meetings, late dinners, helping her brother, etc. 2 weeks end and I come home, head almost immediately to my office. I see a ton of activity on the recorders during the first week and barely anything the second, save a loud vehicle driving by. So, I go back to the first week's recordings and find that she is talking to some guy. To make it even better, she has it on speaker, so I get to hear both sides of the call. Turns out she has been cheating from pretty much day one of our relationship. So, I decided right then, and their revenge was in order. I had to find out who this guy was. Through some sleuthing I found out she met this guy, his wife and family, at a campground she worked at before I met her. Found out where they lived and then checked phone records. This being a few years back, people still had house phones, so I looked up the number. Great, it's listed. I called the number, and a guy answered the phone. I was prepared for this, so in a professional voice asked to speak to Mrs. Smith. He yelled for her, and a woman got on the phone. I asked her if she knew my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend. She said yes, that they had invited her to their house a few times after meeting her at the campground. Wow, that was news to me. I told her we couldn't speak in detail right now, but if she would call me back when she was free to talk, I'd explain everything. I gave her my cell number and hoped that she would be curious enough to call. Sure enough, 2 days later she called. I explained everything that I had recorded. At first she was very skeptical. I told her that I would make a copy of the recording and send it to her. She said okay, but still was skeptical. So, my work was set in motion. I went to a local recording studio along with the files and explained what I needed. They took all of the separate recordings and put them together, so when she wandered through the house it picked up from the different recordings to make the conversation complete. They then burnt these audio recordings to CD. It took 5 CDs to cover it all. I then mailed the CDs to Mrs. Smith, registered mail. Then I waited. About 10 days go by. She finally calls me. She's very calm. She tells me that the day before she went and filed divorce papers. Her husband works on an oil rig and he's out on the rig for the next 2 weeks. After she listened to the CDs I sent her, she gave them to her lawyer. Mr. XXX made a crap ton of money doing what he does, and so over the years they had bought a lot of toys like campground plots, a boat, RV, etc. She made it clear that she was going for half. I got off the phone laughing to myself. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy after the things I heard on those recordings. During all this time I never said a word to the GF. I acted as normal as possible. In fact, I still left the tracker on her car. I didn't think that would produce anything. Things were quiet for another week. Then came the day when hell was starting to break loose. My GF was wandering around the house like she was lost. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me a friend of hers was getting a divorce. I said that's a shame and went about my business. That evening she was out on the deck talking to someone on the phone. I didn't really pay attention except for the fact that every so often she was raising her voice. Phone call ends. She comes back in and goes straight back to the bedroom. I hear a bunch of rustling around, so I walk back to the door and see her packing clothes. I ask her what she's doing and get no reply. She finishes packing and walks out to her car, throws the suitcases in and leaves. 2 weeks go by and not a word from her. I got a call from Mrs. Smith, and she updated me on her world. She had her husband served with the papers and infidelity was the reason. He denied, of course, but she was able to throw details that she said stopped him dead in his tracks. She confirmed the phone call that my GF had the night she left was with her. She said she never raised her voice, but my ex-GF tried swearing up and down that nothing ever happened. Mrs. XXX then put out some details to the GF, enough to let her know she was caught. Mrs. XXX implied that she found out on her own and her next step was to tell me. This is why the GF left so quickly lol. So, this leaves my handling of the GF. Credit card, gone. Car, I called to have repoed. Utilities, arranged to be shut off. Insurance, cancelled. All of her belongings left behind were sent by movers to her dad's house along with a note for the reason. By the way, he lives 2 states away. We lived in a condo, so I arranged for it to be shown for sublease. I was packed and moved in 4 days. New condo, gated community with guard shack. The car was finally picked up. They got it while she was at work. Dealership worked with me on selling the car and I just paid the difference. Mrs. Smith did win her divorce decree and got her half. Mr. Smith never countered on anything, too worried about his company finding out the dirty secrets. Never heard from the ex ever again. The next one is titled, My 28F boyfriend, 28 meters, of 8 years cheated on me with his best friend's fiancé and is now begging me for a second chance. I still love him, but I don't know what to do. Background. I met my boyfriend in college when we had a class together. He was struggling because of his party lifestyle but me, being a studious introvert, was thriving. He begged me to help him, and I relented eventually. I hated his guts but, for some reason, he made me fall in love with him. He was such an open book too and waited patiently for me. I didn't let him kiss me till 4 months into dating and didn't sleep with him till our 1-year anniversary. He was my first and I really wanted to be sure I was giving my virginity to someone who truly loved me. I didn't ask him to, but he slowly gave up partying and drinking for me and we both found a new friend group in college who we've maintained to this day. He gave up everything willingly, because he said he'd rather spend time at home with me. The one thing from his past that he didn't give up though was his childhood best friend who we'll call Max. Max always hated me. I think he blames me that he sees my BF only a few times a month and that he isn't fun anymore. He also openly questions our relationship in front of both of us and says stuff like, "You'll come to your senses eventually," when talking to my BF. I told him I wasn't comfortable, so since then, he never let Max around me, but they still hung out and I really didn't mind because I trusted him. Okay, so this is what happened recently. Max got engaged to his long-term on-again off-again GF and invited both of us over to celebrate. It would have been just the 4 of us. Restrictions have been lifted in our area as long as contact and amount of people involved were kept to a minimum. I declined, which, in retrospect, was a big mistake. BF offered to stay with me, but I told him he didn't need to, and I'd understand if he wanted to support Max even though I despised the guy. Again, this was a mistake in retrospect. The next morning BF came home crying, "We are living together." He was still clearly hungover, so I bathed him and put him to bed. When he woke up a few hours later, he told me everything. Apparently, he got really drunk at the party. Max's fiancé, who I guess I'll call homewrecker or hum, was very flirty with him the whole night and helped him when he passed out. Next thing BF says he remembers was when he woke up, hum was giving him a BJ while he was naked. He says he was too drunk and just went along with it while Max watched. According to BF, They're into the whole hot wife thing, whatever that means. Next thing BF says he remembers was waking up naked next to him with a bunch of used condoms around them. He rushed home after that. My heart is breaking right now, guys, and I really don't know what to do. He's been begging me for a second chance, even showing me. He blocked Max and him on everything. He promised never to contact them again. He also swears to not drink when I'm not around anymore and that he'd keep his phone unlocked and I can look through it whenever I wanted, no questions asked. He kept telling me how much he regrets it and how much he loves me and that I'm the only one. Sad thing is, I believe him. This man was my first everything and I feel like my world is just crumbling around me. A few weeks ago, we were thinking about getting married and how many kids we wanted. Now, I can't even look at him without my heart breaking in two. This all happened a few days ago and I've barely left the room. He's giving me space, but he's also doing the little things that makes me fall for him again. He keeps the house clean. He's been cooking me the food I like and leaving short love notes beside it on the dinner table. I'm lost right now. I so desperately want to forgive him, but every time I look at him, I can't shake off the image of him being with another woman. I know I was never his first, but he kept promising me I was going to be his last and he broke it. Despite everything though, deep down I still love him. Guys, I don't know where to go from here. I'm crying just typing this out, but I don't have anyone to talk to about this. Usually, when problems this big come up in my life, he's the one I turn to for help. I love him, but I don't know if I can trust him anymore. What should I do? Will couples counseling help? Should I just cut my losses and end it? He seems very remorseful, and he did confess to the whole thing immediately after. Should I give him a chance? A user in the comments said, "Just a different perspective here. I know you are very hurt, but is your BF okay? Passing out drunk and finding yourself naked and in a sexual situation suggests he did not give his consent. When that happens to a girl, we call it assault. If the situation is as I understand it, then he was not having sex. His body was being used without informed consent. He was being raped. Another thing to consider is, given his inebriation, it may not even have been his used condoms. Men who are drunk enough to pass out are not always able to perform. Certainly not to fulfillment, and multiple times. I don't feel like he deliberately broke a promise to you. I think he was violated, not just his body, but also because he trusted his friend." Another user said, "Max doesn't like you. They got your boyfriend stuck to the point of passing out and raped him. I'm sorry this sounds harsh to you, but he doesn't need your forgiveness for something he didn't consent to. You need to be supporting him and looking at this from the right angle. I'm sorry this happened to both of you, but you guys should talk about pressing charges. This was intentional on their part. His friend set him up to make it look like he cheated on you, probably knowing what his reaction would be and hoping that the fallout would be you leaving him. I think you should revisit the subject with him. Find out how much he drank. Was it more than he can normally handle? Could he have been drugged? You already know he absolutely did not want to do it, so how did the situation play out that got him there? Stop looking at it as if he cheated on you and realize that he was assaulted and needs your support." The next one is titled, "Update. My 28F boyfriend, 28 meters, of 8 years cheated on me with his best friend's fiancé and is now begging me for a second chance. I still love him, but I don't know what to do. A lot has happened in the last few days. Sorry I haven't been replying to any of you. I just didn't think I was in the right headspace to actually hold a meaningful conversation. Rest assured I did read all of your replies. Even the really mean ones. So where do I begin? Well, I think some of you would be delighted to know that he left me for not being supportive. Sucks to be me, I guess. I guess you guys were right. I am a sucky girlfriend. He's now off to be with his brand new supportive GF. Nah, just kidding, but some of you would have wanted that to happen, right? So, here's what really happened. After reading some of your comments, I started to see things from a different perspective. I never really thought of it as anything other than cheating, and it didn't help that when he came home to me that morning he claimed to have cheated on me, and I guess my mind just started going to a dark place where logic goes out of the window. It's definitely not an excuse, but I really wasn't in the right mindset after he said he cheated. I guess it was after the realization that this man would never willingly hurt me is when all the anger and pain of being cheated on was washed away. I couldn't really bring myself to talk to him at first. He was on the couch blankly staring at whatever was on TV. He looked empty. I sat beside him and told him I had no intentions of breaking up. Well, he came to life almost instantly, and before I knew it, his arms were wrapped around me. He was shaking and I could tell he was crying. I was too. Remember when I said I felt my world was crumbling around me? Well, for the first time in what seemed like forever, I could feel it starting to fall back into place. I didn't realize how much a simple embrace can be so calming. Everything was starting to feel right again. Then we talked. He apologized again for cheating, and when I told him I didn't think he cheated, he had a puzzled look on his face. I asked him if he gave consent and he said no. I tried to explain I guess he still doesn't realize that he was actually taken advantage of. He said the first thing that came to mind after what happened was that he cheated and was so afraid of losing me. This man, after being raped, first thought of how much he betrayed me instead of how he was betrayed himself. I was floored. He said his first response had to be to win me back, which is why he's been going the extra mile the last few days taking care of me from a distance. When it was my turn to speak, I told him how sorry I was for not being supportive. I jumped to conclusions without actually thinking about it clearly, which was pretty out of character for me. A few more exchanges after that and the conversation shifted to Max and him. I told him that I never wanted him anywhere near Max or her again, and he agreed. I've always thought he was a bad influence, but I never thought he'd take it this far, so I never stopped him from seeing his ex-best friend. He showed me his phone, which didn't have a lock anymore. He said he blocked both of them on everything but wanted to keep the open phone policy. He said it's so I can be sure he isn't back in touch with Max. I urged him to file a police report, but he was against it. He said that even if he was raped, he couldn't bring himself to do it. I didn't really know about it at first, but his family and Max's family had a very long history of friendship. Their moms were college best friends, and their dads worked together. Not only were the two of them close, even their families were close. I thought they were just neighbors, but it was more than that. I didn't know cause every time I visit his family, the topic was never brought up, and I haven't really met any of Max's family except for his little sister who came by to play with BF's little brother. He said he didn't want to ruin decades of friendship and would be content with just going to NC with Max. He's getting tested later today, and I hope that witch didn't give my man anything. I'm also pretty confident my BF didn't get him pregnant cause Max absolutely hates children, so I'd imagine him would be on BC given how many dudes she sleeps with. BF and I came to the conclusion that Max most likely set the whole thing up to break us apart so he can have his best friend back. They used to be partners in crime after all, when it came to parties and picking up women. I would like to point out that I did not force him to change. He himself chose to do so, but I know he did it for me, which just makes me fall in love with him even more. When we first met, he was still the playboy party animal he was, but he told me after hanging out with me for a few weeks that he didn't really feel like sleeping around anymore. I didn't really believe him at first, obviously. I've also noticed that a few people were bashing me for making him wait 1 year for sex. I'm sorry, I just have different views. I believe that sex is for people who love each other, so I wasn't willing to sleep with anyone I wasn't deeply in love with and didn't love me back. I don't judge people who sleep around. My BF has a high body count, but I don't really hold it against him. But back then, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't just a girl he bangs or a conquest, but someone who he actually loves and sees a future with. Considering his past, I was very skeptical for a while, and I had my walls up the entire time, but he slowly tore them apart, and I'm glad he did. That reluctant yes when he first asked me out was and still is one of the best decisions I've ever made. Max's plan had the opposite effect. It's rough now, but I can see this experience making our relationship even stronger. I love him more than ever, believe it or not, and I'm sure he feels the same way. The last few days have taught us both how crappy our lives would be without the other. I guess it made us value each other more. Not that either of us took the other for granted. And yes, we are both getting therapy. Both individually and as a couple. To be honest, I'm still shaken over the whole thing. Even when we cuddle, I can still imagine him having her way with him, and I can't help but cry about it. If I'm still shaken up by the whole thing, I can only imagine how much worse it is for him, but I'll be there for him every step of the way. I know he didn't cheat. I know he won't break my heart. I know that he loves me. I know that I love him. It's hard right now, but knowing those facts makes me confident we can see this through. One Redditor pointed out that we were soulmates, and I like to think that we are. I can't see myself being with anyone but him. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.